And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doink Podcast. My name is Brenden D. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We're talking strictly Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to wrap up the NFL draft, talk about anything that's happened over the last couple of days. Eagles rookies getting their jersey numbers, any veteran free agents we think they should sign, anything that's surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles. No one else is doing it than my man, my friend, Thomas Petersen, fresh off cracking a Pepsi, ready for the podcast. What's going on, Thomas?
What's going on, my man? Yeah, what a couple days it's been. And I don't know about you, but it felt kind of insane to go from, the draft, that intense 3 days, and then the couple days afterwards where it's just like boom, like everything just settles and you just get into that, preparing more to get into that deep part of the offseason where nothing happens. But then of course we got rookie minicamp starting, so we got that to look forward to now.
And they announced the jersey numbers. I got some opinions on those. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of discuss day 2, day 3 as a whole. We're going to wrap up the draft and we're going to just discuss kind of what's happened over the last couple of days. Before we do that, Thomas, I want to talk about your videos that you've done on YouTube. You have already done tape breakdown on Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. I have watched the Jalen Carter one. Really well done. You killed it. I have not watched the Nolan Smith one yet, but let's start with Jalen Carter.
You're in for a treat. I actually think that one was better than the Jalen Carter one. I was able to find better tape, I think, on Nolan Smith. And also, like Jalen Carter, it was just giggling because you just go through all of this tape and it's just so good. Like it's just one rep after the other in the tape. It's just him doing wild stuff. And you just sit and look at this and you go, how is this possible that he was he was there at 9? And with all the offseason stuff being talked so much about for the majority of the pre-draft process, I feel like his on-tape stuff kind of got pushed a little bit more back, like in the background. So it wasn't emphasized just how good that was.
Mm-hmm.
With Nolan Smith, it was more for me, it was more to kind of to showcase and go through like some of the concerns with him and why he may have fallen to 30. And some of the questions regarding pass rush volume and are his pass rush win rates, are those like more like inflated? And his size and how he plays in the running game, his pass rushing technique. So I think that was a lot more fun to get into, like some nuances of Smith's game.
With Jalen Carter, I'm going to reiterate kind of what we said. Like he's just different. He moves different. His hand movement is different. It's just he's a gem prospect. Let's do Carter quickly. Like, is there anything else you want to add? I think you already did a good job, but anything else that you saw from Carter that maybe caught you off guard?
Yeah, I think that just the level of which he played that caught me off guard. Like I knew he was good, and like I've seen some of the stuff that he's put out there before the draft happened, of course. But of course, when the Eagles draft him, you want to get a lot more into detail, and just the way that he combines first step quickness, bend, and usage of the hands is just it's bonkers. And his ability to transfer power into a move, like his hand placement when he's going up face up against a guard within like that split second, like he'll get perfect hand placement on a punch and then land a swim move right after. So the guard really won't know what hit him because they're bracing for a bull rush type of move and getting pushed back and anchoring. And when they're going backwards and settling in balance, they're suddenly getting pushed to the side. And he's so good at not exposing himself for drive blocks where basically the offensive line just plant their hand in your chest and just drive you into the ground if you're trying to make a funny move. He just never really does that. So that caught me off guard, just how consistently good he is with that.
Yeah, his technique is off the charts. Like his hand movement, hand placement was really kind of what caught my eye in the little tape that I've watched since. The TCU game I've kind of got through and a little bit some other tape, but that's what my summer's going to be is watching Jalen Carter. And I think you did a really good job of just kind of emphasizing how good of a prospect he was and getting Eagles fans excited. Because I really want to like drive down the fact that he should not have been there at 9. And the fact that he was there at 9 is kind of a blessing. Yeah. Hey, Nolan Smith. So Nolan Smith, I guess the question I'll ask you is, why do you think he fell to 30?
I think it's a combination between other guys available in the draft. We had the discussions during the draft, you and I, in our little text chat here. we're looking at the Bengals, and we're like, all right, that should be a spot for Nolan Smith. Like, he can go there. And then Miles Murphy is available, so they want to go edge at that point, but they want to get the bigger guy who has it a little bit. He still has those athletic traits, maybe a little bit more production.
Just a different style athletic traits than Nolan.
Yeah,
Nolan
it's
Smith.
different. It doesn't pop as much, but he still translated it into production, and especially in 2021. So like, he goes there. There are some other spots there Packers go with a Lucas Van Ness, fits more their type of player. We know they took Rashawn Gary as well. So like, they like a little bit more of those size guys that has a little bit more versatility to go inside and outside. I think there were a couple, like Kalashi Kansas goes to Bucks. Cowboys take Moxie Smith, for example. So I think there was a couple of places where like there were needs, like there teams going for the defensive line. I just think Eagles got kind of lucky that they were vouching for other type of players than Nolan Smith. And of course, there always comes that pass rush volume production. Like, he didn't pass rush a lot at Georgia. And the same with kind of like with Jordan Davis and even Jalen Carter and his production. Like, a lot of these guys, they get rotated a lot, so their snaps just kind of go down. They play on teams that are stupid talented, so like the production kind of goes around. And also just the scheme that Georgia plays, like, they blitz so much, they do so many things on the defensive line. So to be a Georgia player, you really have to be selfless, because you're not going to get you're not schemed to get the sack.
They're working as a unit. They're almost working as like an offensive line together.
Right. So it's more often than not, it's predetermined where you're going. Like, you don't have the ability to go inside or outside if you want to. It's predetermined. You're stunting to this side because there's going to be a blitz coming right on the edge of you, and you're going to drag that tackle inwards, or it's going to look bad on the defense. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of hampers the productions a little bit and kind of keeps that down for some of these players. And then combining that with some of that size, and obviously he missed time due to a pectoral injury, so there's that thing as well. And then just how the draft kind of shook out, and with other teams taking D-line, going up like in other spots with also super talented players there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't think there are not 29 players in this draft better than Nolan Smith.
100% agree. Yeah, I think the Eagles got away with 2 of the top 15 players in the draft, at least.
Yeah, and it's sort of the consensus a little bit about it. I know, like, guys like Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks and these type of guys that I really like to listen to always say that when they're doing these draft boards, when media members are doing draft boards, they're just going off who to them, from a broad sense, are the best players, and they'll do their board off of that. Teams have very different boards because they do different type of things. They have a different type of defensive scheme, and a different philosophy. Obviously, they also have the interviews, so they can kind of finish off that. So when you're a team, it's very different how you're setting up your draft board than when you're a media member, because you're looking at what is our structure of our defense. And if you don't want a 3-4 outside linebacker type like Nolan Smith, like say you're strictly a 4-3 defense, where do you put Nolan Smith? Like, his value kind of drops off, because at that point you'd like him to play Sam linebacker off ball. That's not the fit. So their board will look a lot different than some of the guys we see. But Dane Brookler with the Beast for the Athletic had him at 12. Darren Jeremiah had him at 13. PFF had him at 13. It's kind of that consensus rate around him there, from that top 15 range. So I think you're right.
So it kind of goes into like even the 7th round pick. Like we talked about how we saying, I think it was on the Jason Kelsey podcast, he said they have to find other avenues to get better. That could be players that are undersized. It could be players that have different traits that other teams don't see value in. Nolan Smith, an example. Moro Ojumo, the guy that they took in the 7th round, is another example of that. A guy who has like a really good body type and athleticism. He just didn't have the college production behind it. So every kind of pick that the Eagles made and every kind of move that the Eagles made kind of goes back to what he did say on that Jason Kelsey podcast, where they have to find different avenues and different ways to get better that other teams don't see value in. If you're like me, you were tired of trying to find jeans that fit right no matter your build and still look good. Introducing the newest sponsor of the Double Doink podcast, Sweat Tailor, a premium menswear brand that is defining a new kind of casual. I started wearing Sweat Tailor, and I am blown away by how comfortable and affordable the clothes are. And of course, they look great. My favorite is the all-in pants. It's a 5-pocket pant that feels like sweats but look way better. Thoughtfully tailored and unbelievably stretchy. From jackets and pants to joggers and hoodies, Sweat Tailor's designs are made to seamlessly fit into your life, moving from runway to office, office to drinks, and drinks to wherever the night takes you. Specializing in casual wear for men, pieces are designed with comfort and versatility in mind for your everyday. Use promo code BDEEGST. That is BDEEGST for 25% off. That again is BDEEGST for 25% off your order at sweattailor.com. We haven't talked about the day 2 prospects yet. So Eagles end up with Tyler Steen and Sidney Brown. They end up with kind of two, it was like late third. They traded down for one pick. So they had like late third, early third, and 2 early third round picks, right?
Yeah, exactly. Trade down from late second to early.
So they end up with back-to-back picks. They go with Tyler Steen from Alabama and Sidney Brown from Illinois. Canadian boy. We got a Canadian on the roster again. Alex Singleton left, so he was the only other Canadian. But
we talked a lot about another Brown.
We talked about his brother a lot.
Yeah, Sydney ends up being the guy there.
So they grew up about an hour and a half away from my house in London, Ontario. So it's about an hour and a half east. I've been to London a bunch of times. They have a really cool story. Like, I don't know if you know about Chase and Sidney Brown's upbringing, but
give it to me.
So a Canadian television broadcaster, it's called TSN. It's like the ESPN. It's an ESPN affiliate, but it's like the Canadian broadcast channel. They actually did a documentary on Sidney and Chase Brown the day before the draft. I watched it. I think NFL Network did one as well, but the TSN one was done a lot better and what kind of went in more depth. They were homeless, like Chase and Sidney Brown in high school. The mom got really sick. They battled poverty, homelessness, and they basically use football as the avenue to get out of this. So like they have a really cool upbringing. Like Sidney and Chase worked their tails off to get where they are today. They had nothing given to them. So I really recommend, if you are listening to this, go check out and do some more background on Chase and Sidney Brown. Like this, Sidney Brown's a guy that Eagles fans are just going to absolutely love. He just such a hard worker, such a really cool guy. Like I said, being born in London, Ontario, and make it to the NFL is very hard. Like, it's not easy. It's like it's a story that like every Canadian can get behind, and every person in general can get behind. It's not an easy thing to do. So I just kind of wanted to get that off before we dive into it, because I really think fans are going to really like Sidney Brown. But let's talk.
Look at both of the bodies of Sidney and Chase. I mean, those guys they look like they lived in a gym.
Yeah, they did, man. Like it's remarkable.
You see the dedication just in the product that they have with their bodies. I mean, they're so stupidly athletic, both of them.
And I don't know if you saw it. So when Sidney Brown was drafted, he was with a bunch of people. Like, it was a really emotional time for him. I think the introductory press conference kind of got screwed up because he was with so many people and they couldn't get the connection properly. But he did it in London. He had his party in London, so he's got his Canadian roots still. But yeah, let's talk about the player. What do you make of Sidney Brown?
So Sidney is probably or if not one of the best like safeties in the class. Like so Brian Branch, a lot more of a nickel type player strictly. Like, he did not play box too much. He did not play post safety, whereas Sidney Brown played everything, and has been moving all around the Illinois defense. So he's experienced in everything you can throw in his way. They play multitude of different types of coverages. When you're looking at him on film, he is so comfortable in the scheme that they were playing in Illinois. He just looks like he talked about this today, actually, in the rookie press conference, where he said, like, he practices so much that it becomes unconscious consciousness. I think he called it like that. Whereas, you're not thinking of what you practice something so much that you're not thinking of what you're doing. You're just doing the right thing because that's what you've been training to do. And that way you can just let yourself go and just play football, because you're instantly doing exactly what you have to do because you've been practicing it so much. And he just looks that way. He, like, pre-snap off a play, he'll walk around, he'll look at the safety, he'll make like a bunch of different type of calls. He'll be going up to the line of scrimmage. And then because he is so fast, like, and quick, there's very distinct difference between these two things here. When he changes the direction, it just goes like this, and he's out of there. Like, he changed direction like that. So when he's moving around pre-snap, he can make something look like one thing, and then he's right up, manned up against the number 3 receiver to his side, for example. And that just shows so much, because uncomfortable defensive players somebody that's thinking a lot about their assignment and what they have to do. They're strictly focused on that. If you have man number 3, if they know in their mind, I got man on this guy, they're not going to be bouncing around on the field. If they know I have man on this guy, that is my responsibility. Whereas if you know that and you're comfortable in your own athletic ability, you'll start playing around with this thing here, because that's how you show quarterbacks different type of looks and put yourself in an advantageous position post snap. So that really stood out to me, how in sync he just looks with the plays.
He's so experienced. I think like one of my biggest takeaways from this pick, I think this is the most interesting pick the Eagles made in this draft, because it was kind of against the grain, against what they've done in the past. This is the biggest bet that they've made at safety in the draft since Jaquan Jarrett in 2011. And I was going through the other day, like, what did Jaquan Jarrett look like coming out of the draft? Jaquan Jarrett ran a 4.69 40. He was a bigger guy. He had a better body type. Like, he had 17 reps on the bench. Like, he was more of a bigger guy, safety. Like, completely different body type than Sidney Brown. And I don't know, like, this is a long, I could be connecting dots here. This is a long shot, but they might have like learned their lesson from Jaquan Jarrett with safeties, because Jaquan Jarrett didn't turn out to be a very good player in 2011. Like, he wasn't with the Eagles for very long, but he was the 2nd round pick, the 54th selection in the draft. So this is the Eagles saying, we like this player. We are going to go out of our way to get this player at a position of need. And this is something that the team doesn't do very often. Like, the Eagles were going to take an offensive lineman. Like, Tyler Steen is the Eagles. Like, that's their DNA pick, right? This is like not their DNA pick. And you got something you want to show me on?
Yeah. Just take a look at the spider chart right here. That's Sidney Brown. You can take his height. That's the only knock you can have on this guy.
Yeah.
Like that, like from an analytical standpoint, and just from the way that if you combine this with how he was used all over the field, you're looking at a guy right now that if he didn't have this height issue, he would have gone a lot before. Because you just combine it, like you said, experience. He's a super athlete. Let me just look at this thing right here. Just look at it. 4.47 for a guy at safety, super. 40.5 vertical. Like, come on, like, get out of here. 130 broad, 23 bench. Like, we talked about how
he benched more than Jaquan Jarrett. Now that you say it, yeah.
So, I mean, just from a guy who's been living at the gym, you can just see it, and it pops on tape. So, yeah, I think this is a really interesting pick. I think it's really good value for the Eagles that, like, they don't draft safeties high. So 3rd round is a commitment for them. They needed that. I mean, they needed somebody at safety that can come in there with real talent. Now, it's not that he's not flawed. Like, when you look at him at the tape, he's reckless sometimes when he's coming up to make tackles. Like, he won't wrap up. He'll kind of duck his head sometimes, go for a big hit. He's going to get coached up to that. That's something that can be worked with. That's easy to work with.
I would rather take a bet on something like that than a guy who's doesn't have the athletic traits like that.
Right.
And that won't transition to the NFL. Yeah. Like, I think this is the coolest pick. I think this is the guy that the Eagles are going to like love. And his, like, Howie Roseman had a great analogy when he was discussing the pick at his press conference after. He said Sidney Brown is just fun to watch. And he is very fun to watch. Like, you can tell that this is a guy that the Eagles brass loved during the draft process. And to take him this high, like, he's funny because a lot of, like, you brought up how Nolan Smith was 15th, 13th, and all these other draft boards. Sidney Brown's rankings on people's draft boards were all over the place. Like, Dane Brugler's The Beast had Sidney Brown as his 10th ranked safety. I think Daniel Jeremiah had him as like his 4th or 5th ranked safety. Like, he, depending on the type of scout that was watching him or the type of person that was watching him,
right,
will be ranked differently in what they look at. I think this is a pick that Eagles fans should be excited about, because their team went out of their way to fill maybe a need and the player that they like. They weren't too scared to say, you know what, let's take a safety in the 3rd round instead of drafting an offensive or defensive lineman. We really like this player. We don't value safety very much, but who cares? We'll draft this guy, and he can. Like, I think Sidney Brown's going to start day one.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, bearing the Eagles going out and signing John Johnson or.
Which I do think they're going to make another move at safety as well, safety and linebacker as well.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that later, but
they might do that as well. There's another guy out there at safety who played with Sean Desai before, former Bear safety.
Has Adrian Amos been signed yet?
No, exactly. Adrian Amos is the guy. Yeah,
okay.
So that's also an option that could bring in there as safety. But just looking at the roster as it stands right now, Sidney Brown is in a very good spot to play the most snaps for the Eagles from this entire draft class.
And he was very good in coverage last year compared to other years. Like, it's almost like, I don't know what happened in the 2022 or 2021 offseason to 2022, but his coverage numbers were 10 times better in last year's year. Like, I think he had 13 passes defended. He was the 4th ranked coverage safety in PFF's database, which is very good. Take PFF for a grain of salt, what you will, but that's very high. And
he's in a position to make plays usually, and that's what you're looking for.
And this guy's going to be a hard worker, like I said, just such an interesting.
Yeah, when you combine like the brains with the body, like he has the mentality. Like he like you said today, like he was asked what he's been doing the last week. He said like study. So I mean, he's grinding through the playbook. He knows that he has a chance to get a starting role day one. He has the athleticism to do it. If you combine those things, that's a beautiful thing.
And 50 starts as well. And that includes the COVID year. Like COVID, they only played 6 games at Illinois, right? To have 50 career starts in college, especially during a year that was cut in half, like there's impressive like experience, impressive stats, an impressive person. I really like that.
Brenden, he's 23.
Yeah,
how do you feel about that? Can we get an official statement?
When we get to the 3rd round, the age thing doesn't bug me as much.
Okay,
I knew this was coming. If he was in the 1st round, yeah, it would have been a completely different conversation. But 3rd round, I'm fine drafting a 23-year-old safety. That's completely fine. Now, Moro Ojomo is only 21 years old, the 7th round pick.
Moro is the youngest.
He's 21 years old.
No. Keeley Ringo is 20, right?
Yeah, Keeley Ringo's 20.
Right.
Moro Ojomo, he was born and raised in Nigeria, or he was in Nigeria as a kid, so he was in school 2 years earlier. Like, he's a really smart guy. We'll talk about him when we get to day 3. But Tyler Steen, do you want to let's talk about Tyler Steen a little bit here? So the Eagles take Alabama offensive tackle. So they announced him as a guard. I pointed out on Twitter, like, he really only played tackle, but that happens. I just want, because people were confused when I said he was an offensive tackle when he was announced as a guard. He did play offensive tackle at Alabama. I think he played 1 guard snap in his entire career at Alabama. But to me, it sounds like he's going to make the transition similar to people were talking like Peter Skoronsky during the draft process. He will probably compete for the offensive guard job in training camp.
He's going to lose horribly.
Yes. I want to push back. Thank you for saying that. I don't think there's going to be a competition. I think people are getting way over themselves. Cam Jurgens is going to be the starting guard on this team. Oh, yeah. And I think people need to just accept that. He's going to be, quote unquote, competing for the starting guard job, but
I a massive surprise. Like, unless the Jeff Stoutland just kind of goes in his bag and sprinkles some kind of dust over Tyler Steen when he suddenly gets, like, magically becomes a much better second level blocker.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, people.
Exactly.
It's Cam Jurgens. The reason Cam Jurgens is so good is because he's an athlete in the sense that when he's combo blocking in a zone blocking scheme with somebody, let's say him and Lane Johnson, just take that example. Those 2 guys who combo blocking on the guy who's in the 3 technique, so right in between the guard and the tackle. Cam Jurgens, the angle he takes and the speed he has to get to the second level of linebackers, those guys you want to get up there and kind of spring that second level free. He's so good at that. He's unmatched good at that. That's why we compare him to Jason Kelce, because the way he finds those players in space is special. Tyler does not do that. He is so clumsy. He's rigid when he gets to the second level. It doesn't look great. Yeah, Tyler is a really good athlete in the pass protection game. He's not really good technically as a run blocker. That's just how it is.
Yeah, he needs work. This is probably I think my least favorite pick of the draft right now is Tyler Steen. Like, I wasn't blown away with his stats and stuff like that, but what am I? Like, I don't know too much about offense. I just, like, that's the thing. I give Jeff Stoutland the benefit of the doubt here. Yeah. Like, he obviously knows more about offensive line than I do. And I kind of go back to something again said on Jason Kelce podcast. They talked about Stoutland saying, like, I can fix that. Like, when does he have the athleticism? Does he have, like, kind of the meats and the bones of being an offensive lineman? And can I fix the stuff that you're talking about? Like the intangibles of being good in the run game and where to put your hands properly. Like, he's going to need some work. But I think this is a guy that could be like a starting right guard in 2024 if everything does go well, right? Like, when Jason Kelce does retire, Cam Jurgens moves over to center, then you maybe have your starting guard. I think that's what they're probably thinking with this draft.
They're thinking versatility with him as well. Like, he played left tackle for Alabama and did it pretty well. I mean, he's a technically fine pass protector who can play left tackle. Learning how to run block and the technique in the running game is much more manageable than setting up for pass protection.
Yeah.
Like the footwork and the angles that goes into being a good pass blocking offensive lineman is so much more advanced than mauling in the running game.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that with Jordan Mailata as well. Like in his early years, moved people. Like he was just a natural at run blocking. Took a while for him to learn how to really get the angles right, setting the anchor, when to bend, when to not bend, when to catch, when to attack. He's become really obviously really good at it. But that's one of the things with Tyler that I would not expect him at all to play any meaningful snaps, but he has the versatility to do so in a dramatic injury season. Like
Mm-hmm.
you'd be more comfortable with putting him in there than say if you drafted a guard only type prospect in the 3rd round who may be a better fit at guard immediately, but doesn't have any tackle experience. Like here you get a legit tackle out of college who played at a high level and played well, and you transfer him into guard, and then you have that opportunity like for a 3rd round pick. That's really good value.
He was Alabama's only decent offensive lineman last year too.
Yeah, they sucked. I was surprised.
Yeah, really. Alabama's offensive line was awful last year, and he was like the only good one. And I think he allowed 2 sacks out of like 400 something pass blocking snaps for Bryce Young last year. Bryce Young, like, of course he's awesome, but like maybe not the easiest guy to block for sometimes because he moves around so much in the pocket. So, and he transferred over from Vanderbilt too. Like he has a lot of starting experience. So again, when I say like probably my least favorite pick, I'm saying something because I like most of the picks that they did make. It's just I do think he has a lot of work to do, and I don't expect him to see him on the field in 2023. Like I think Eagles fans, you probably you're not going to see a ton of Tyler Steen unless there's an injury riddle season, like you said. Which 2020 it happens. We saw in 2012 as well. So
yeah. It was a need. They found the right guy for it, and like you said, if Stoutland is pointing out him saying I can work with that, I can fix that. Perfect.
And the offensive, where they did draft him, the offensive lineman kind of fell dramatically from when they had Tyler Steen. Like, let's say they passed on Tyler Steen, you probably weren't going to find a dude with his capability for later in the draft. Like, they kind of were stuck to we got to go get our offensive lineman now, or else we're kind of screwed for the rest of the draft. So I think the pick is obviously fine. But okay, let's jump into day 3. I think this was maybe the most exciting day. Day 1 was a lot of fun, but day 3 had a ton of stuff. Let's talk about Keeley Ringo. Okay, so before we get into the DeAndre Swift stuff, I want to talk about Keeley Ringo. So the Eagles traded back up into the 4th round, the 3rd pick in the 4th round.
Started.
They wasted no time. I think the New Orleans traded right away first. Then the Raiders, I think, did it right again. And then the Eagles were like, okay, we got to go make our move. I went into day 3. I remember I was on the train downtown for work. I was covering the draft day 3 at the Score, and I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, there's no freaking way Howie's waiting till the 6th round to make a draft pick. They're gonna go do a move quickly, and then of course it happens right there. So, what do you make of Keeley Ringo? And what do you make of the compensation they gave up too? Because I do think it's important. They gave up a 2024 3rd round pick to go get Keeley Ringo. So
yeah,
this was kind of like we really like this player. Kind of trade. You don't give up that compensation for nothing. So what do you make of Keeley Ringo?
Very reminiscent of last year's draft when Nakobe Dean was available in the 3rd round. In that Eagles coming out after the draft saying that they had a really high grade on Ringo, and they were considering taking him around that same time that when it took Sidney Brown. They had discussions there if they were going to be taking Keeley or be taking Sidney. And so for them, when they had him as high as they did, like they had a 3rd round grade on him there. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been mulling about taking him at that spot. And he's available in the 4th round. They're of course thinking here we can get a legit type prospect here, taking away the 3rd round pick next year. So if they had a grade on him that matched what they would have been willing to actually draft him at, it makes a lot of sense to give up that 3rd round pick next year, because if they would have taken him with a 3rd round pick regardless, I mean, if they're sitting there in the war room going, holy shit, he's available, we need this developmental type cornerback, because that's what he is. Like we said before, he's 20 years old. You don't see unicorns like that with his combination of size and speed.
Like the player profile doesn't last to the 4th round.
No. And he was mocked in the 1st round for a long time. Like even in February, there were mock drafts out there had him go in the 1st round simply because of the fact that he's so big and he's so fast. Then of course all comes the tape comes around and you see a guy who's pretty stiff, who's kind of rigid and is a lot like
the
he will
40
be a
yard dash.
blocking.
The 40-yard dash doesn't match the hip movement and stuff like that. If that
No, the 40-yard dash is. I think it matches really well because never on tape do you see him get burnt down the field.
The straight line speed doesn't match like the
exactly. His three cone was terrible.
Yes, that's what
and that really stands out. But even then, I mean, I think Keeley Ringo in the right defense, if you're going into like a zone heavy type defense, he'd be an immediate starter. Like he'd be day one starter in a zone heavy defense. But if you're getting out there and you want this guy to be like a press cornerback or a press bail cornerback in a man coverage scheme, he's going to get burned so bad to begin with, going up against really good route runners. But it doesn't matter to him now. He's 20 years old. He's just a kid, and he's coming out of college here. He's going to be sitting behind James Bradbury and Darius Slay for 2 years before he's probably ever going to be called upon, bearing injury again. But I mean, you have Greedy Williams, now you have Keeley Ringo, you have Zach McPherson, like all these guys. Like suddenly, with the addition of Keeley Ringo, you have your 2 All-Pro type cornerbacks in Darius Slay and James Bradbury. You have 2 really good backup guys options there in Zach McPherson and Greedy Williams. And if Keeley Ringo shines, which we all hopefully he does, but even if he doesn't, like there's no pressure on him.
There's no
whatsoever.
rush with him. Like they can take their sweet time with this
right
kid.
And he's a 4th round pick, so he's not supposed to.
And I think the key thing with the compensation, like I'm not a huge fan of giving away a 3rd round pick to draft someone in the 4th, but they were drafting in the 6th round. Like they had to go up and get that pick. They had to give up something there. And the Eagles have enough draft capital in 2024 where it really doesn't matter. They have another 3rd round pick. Like, let's say they didn't have a 3rd round pick. I think you can look at it a different way, but I'm completely fine with the compensation. I know it seems like a lot on the surface of things, but completely fine with it. I really like the player, like the player profile story. The tape, not in love with it, but I'm sure I'll come around as I watch him more in the summer. There's a lot of people that really liked him. I think Benjamin Solak from the Philly Special Podcast and The Ringer had him as like a 2nd favorite cornerback. Like depending on who you talk to, the traits are there. And are you buying any of the safety stuff? Because I'm not. I think he's a development.
No.
Okay,
he's not going to play safety. He's going to play cornerback.
Okay.
Like
I saw a lot of people tossing. He played. Stuff. No, it's not happening.
No. He played cornerback. He played cornerback for 2 years at Georgia. 19 years old and 20 years old. He's a cornerback. His ceiling is super high. You're not going to mess with that. You're just going to let him develop at cornerback. Don't throw too much already on his way because the things he needs to work on already, like there's enough on the plate right there, in my opinion. And I think you're kind of set at safety. And I look elsewhere to throw guys down to play safety than him. But I mean, just to go back on that traits and everything, the only reason we're looking at these 3rd round picks here in the 60s, Eagles moved up from around the 90s. What were the mid 90s in the 3rd round before that whole tampering Jonathan Gannon thing? If the Eagles are as successful as we're projecting them to be, and as they should be going into next season, their 3rd round pick is going to be just about that, like pick 100. And they got about, like, what did they trade for? Pick 103? What was Keeley Ringo? 103, 105, something like that age. Like, so
he was 100. He's the 105th pick.
Right. So you may be giving up
a round picks to go up and get him. So,
gotcha. So you may be giving up a 3rd round pick on paper, but that 3rd round pick is going to be looking more and more like a 4th round pick if the Eagles win a lot of games. So they're basically swapping if the Eagles do well.
Mm-hmm. No, 100% agreed. Okay, DeAndre Swift. Let's talk about him. I think this one is really cool. The more the days go by and the minutes go by, I'm kind of liking this one a lot more. The Eagles give up a 2025 4th round pick for Detroit Lions running back DeAndre Swift. What do you make of the fit? What do you make of the player?
The fit is really good. I mean, he's got pass catching ability. He's a Georgia Bulldog. Checks all the boxes.
He's a Georgia player. Fits everything, man.
It fits everything. He was a really efficient runner last season. I think the compensation was a little bit rich. I mean, for a guy who was already on his way out the door, everybody knew it. When they made that pick for Mr. Jahmyr Gibbs, everybody and their mother knew that DeAndre that Swift was out the door there. They also signed David Montgomery. So I think the compensation was a little bit high, like a 4th round pick for him. I get it. I think it's
5th, 4th round pick. We can worry about that shit.
Isn't it a 4th?
Yeah, 2025 4th round pick. Like the 4th round pick is not till 2025.
Right. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it was like for a guy who is basically with one foot out the door. But I mean, nobody's going to think of that when he's catching passes and rushing for touchdowns there. So I think the Eagles have a with DeAndre Swift, they have a versatile room. I think DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, if both of them stay healthy, which is a big if for both of them have gone through a lot of injuries, but they can complement each other. They don't have to take as big of a workload as they've been doing at other teams in prior years. Both those guys are more talented running backs than Miles Sanders.
Yep, I think like it goes to show like the Bijan Robinson stuff in the first round was always crazy. And how Adam Schefter had a really interesting tweet about this. Like if let's say he does play well this year, right, and he does move on in free agency somewhere, the Eagles will get a comp pick in 2025 for his services. Now
Right.
again, he has to play well this year. There's a lot
He has to
dictating
play
on
well. They don't have to sign anybody. He has to
that.
play a lot of
Exactly.
snaps.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
He
that
has
goes
to have a
with it.
contract. Like we saw the free agency list this year of running backs. It's berserk. So there's no real guarantee that he'll get signed to anything really massive. So I mean, yeah, comp pick maybe. I wouldn't bank on it too much.
Mm-hmm. No, I agreed. I think that is somewhat interesting with this. I think this kid's gonna come in and like, try to resurrect his career. This is almost like this CJ Gardner Johnson trade, maybe a little bit of last year. Like it's contract year. Like there's a lot riding on this year for DeAndre Swift, and he has now the pathway to be the number one back. Like I know, I personally think if all goes well with Rashad Penny, he should be the number one starting running back.
Yeah.
But let's say something happens to him, an injury wise, or he doesn't look good in training camp. This kind of opens the door for DeAndre Swift to have a big year for this team. And I think he fits the scheme really nicely. Like I think this is a guy that Eagles fans like. I brought this up with Sidney Brown. Eagles fans are going to really like, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. And he's wearing number 0, baby.
Yeah, I think, and
Eagles
just
player.
He's the type of running back that would fit really well in a read option offense.
Mm-hmm.
There are just some like when the whole Derrick Henry rumors were going around, like I pictured like Derrick Henry in a zone read offense. Like, no, that doesn't work. I mean, that would look so slow. Whereas you put DeAndre Swift in there, that's a whole other situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's quickly round up the day 3. So Moro Ojuma, we already talked about from Texas. Kind of a bigger body. He's listed on defensive tackle on some people's boards. He can kind of play all around the defensive line. Only 21 years old. Kind of like the swing in the 7th round. I think he's going to make the team. Like I think this is a guy that they're going to keep around. Like I don't think this is a guy that they're going to want to put on waivers. Like I think he'll have a roster spot.
He's a perfect role player for the Eagles. Like
yeah,
he's a perfect 3-4 defensive end.
And this is like more of a developmental guy, right? He's only 21 years old. Being 21 and being a 5-year starter in college is very rare. Like he's like, so that doesn't happen very often. So he's kind of a very interesting prospect that wise. And last one is Tanner McKee, quarterback factory. What do we make of Tanner McKee coming to Philly?
I have no idea anything about Tanner McKee. The only thing I know about Tanner McKee is that he was always the 6th cornerback on every single draft board I looked at from Daniel Jeremiah, like Bucky, PFF, all these guys. They all had Tanner McKee. It was Bryce, CJ, Anthony, Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, and then it was always McKee there at the end. So I guess like apparently he has a strong arm. He's a statue. It's a swing at a quarterback. DTR was gone. I think they went into the draft thinking they had to get a guy right there at backup that they could hopefully develop into some kind of backup in like next year. So when Marcus Mariota's contract is up, they won't have anything other than a rookie contract deal at QB2 at best. And if that works out that way, perfect. I mean, it's low risk. It could be a high reward just in terms of that they wouldn't have to pay anyone to be a QB2.
That's what this is from. Like they don't want to do the Marcus Mariota contract every single year, right? They want someone to take that role. It's interesting fit because he's literally the anti Jalen Hurts. Like, he has no athletic. Really,
he's an unathletic Gardner Minshew.
Yes, basically, yeah. But he's got a really good arm. He sees the field really well. He's got that big body type. Like he's 6'6", which is like I know people love their tall quarterbacks in the NFL, but he does have that size. So I think it's fine. I think people overreacted to this pick on social media for the Eagles, but completely fine with the swing there. If they like, I trust Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni scout quarterbacks. If they really like him, completely fine taking a swing on him.
You can never go wrong with a good arm. Like if you have a guy with an arm, it's up to the coaches.
Okay, let's talk about the player numbers quickly. What do you make of the numbers, jersey numbers that they've given out? Nicholas Morrow, number 41, is my least favorite one. And we do it here. Oh, Nicholas Morrow, buddy. You couldn't ask for a better number. 41 must be the most like non-pleasing jersey number in football. Hated that one. Other than that, I'm fine with everyone. I like Jalen Carter wearing number 98. Nolan Smith wearing number 3 is pretty cool. Swift number 0. Any number takes you got.
Keeley Ringo, I think is 37. That's not gonna last.
Not a big fan of that.
That's not gonna last. Whenever the practice squad guy, whenever these invites guys are gone, he's gonna be able to have a number in the 20s. I both think both 22 and 23 are gonna be available. Nicholas Morrow, absolutely agree. 41 looks way too similar to 47, and I get Nate Gary jitters all over my body. I don't like it. There's only one little line missing before it's a 47. I do not dig that. Not a big numbers guy. I love the fact that Nolan Smith stayed in the single digits, and that he and Hassan Reddick are rocking the 3 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
They're gonna look cool. I didn't even think of that. The 3 and the 7 on both sides, rushing from each end. Fire.
I like that as well. I think 98 to Carter, good number as well. Other than that, no real big take. I think Sidney Brown was 43.
Sidney Brown's 43. Not
great.
But great. It's Troy Polamalu. Polamalu's number 43. He made it work. So maybe I'm not comparing him to Troy Polamalu, but
now I love it.
Yeah, and they both got the hair.
All it had to take.
They both got the hair too, so that could work. Okay, quick. 2 more things. One, any free agents on the market that have kind of caught your eye? Any players that you maybe think the Eagles could go after via trade over the next couple months? What do you think the next couple months look like for the Eagles acquiring players via trade or free agency?
So I think Adrian Amos is obviously a name to watch. The natural Sean Desai connection. Eagles, I wouldn't say paper thin at safety, but it's getting close to that area. Like they're not a lot has to go wrong for K'Wan Wallace to be in line to start. I would not love that. I would like some veteran presence back there. Right now, we're looking at a Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown. That will probably be my 2 preferred starters at this point right here. They signed that guy from the Saints. That was like it's a little bit of veteran presence there. If Adrian Amos can be signed for somewhat of a reasonable contract, I think that's a lot lot-better than what they'd be having right now. Linebacker market, I don't love it. Quan Alexander is an option. Rashad Evans, still a free agent as well. Like, it's not guys that are like get signed, and it's like
Zach Cunningham is also a guy on the market, I believe.
Yeah,
still
Zach
right?
Cunningham. He could come in and say hi.
We were talking about him like in previous episodes. That was kind of the only name. The free agent linebacker market is very scarce right now. I think Patrick Queen via trade might be their best option. I don't really like Patrick Queen as a player that much, but he's a younger player. Maybe they take a swing on him. I don't really like giving up a draft pick. Maybe you throw Baltimore like the latest 7th round pick you can find over the next few years and go, here, take this, and we'll take Patrick Queen. But
I think for me, I would rather, like, if those are the options, I'd rather see what Christian Ellis can do in training camp, to be honest. Like, I know it's like, again, it's a thin position group there. But if the Eagles were to play a little bit more of a 3-4 style defense where they move one of the linebackers out, like, so they only have Nakobe Dean as the only Mike linebacker on the field. They can put Sidney Brown in there in a spot as an extra nickel defender out there. They can put Nolan Smith out there on the field along with Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. Like, just put him out there as that extra guy right around the line. He can drop into coverage. That's no problem at all. And then you just take away a linebacker from that spot. So basically, you're playing 3-4 nickel, but taking away the will and putting him out there as Nolan Smith, for example. Whatever it takes to get Nolan on the field.
I saw a tweet from Honest NFL that I thought was really cool. So Sean Desai ran a lot of 3-3-5 in Chicago when he was defensive coordinator. That's what Georgia ran too. Like, I think this kind of scheme transition for a lot of these guys is going to be pretty smooth.
Yeah, absolutely has the ability to be it. So I wouldn't say that linebacker is a massive need. But yeah, it's
if you're gonna be bad at a position, be bad at linebacker.
Yeah,
the Eagles won the Super Bowl with Najee freaking good at starting a linebacker, right? So they also did give up a ton of points in that game, but at the same time, I would rather be weak up the middle of the defense than any other position on the field. And I do think the Sidney Brown draft pick kind of eases the middle of the defense. Okay, last point I wanted to make. I was thinking the other night about the 2020 season and when the Eagles lost to the Dallas Cowboys in that game. when the Jalen Hurts to Deshaun Jackson touchdown happened. And I remember feeling the Cowboys ended, like Andy Dalton ended up picking the defense apart, and the Cowboys ended up winning that game, and the Eagles were knocked out of the playoffs, or playoff contention for what you will that year. I remember like thinking after that game, like, holy shit, this team is in such a bad spot going forward. To look back on that game and to have this draft weekend and make the Super Bowl last year, the Philadelphia Eagles roster and everything around the Eagles right now is in such a good place than it was just 2 years ago, where I think this is like it's more exciting to be an Eagles fan right now than it almost was at the beginning of last season when they made all those trades and made all those crazy acquisitions before the draft and on draft day and before the season with CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think this is like the best time to be an Eagles fan in a very, very long time. And I just kind of wanted to say that before we go.
I think that's a perfect way to end the podcast.
And quickly, DeAndre Swift and Deshaun Jackson look a lot alike.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. A little bit more muscle to him, but
yeah, he's got a little chubbier face, but he looks a lot like Deshaun Jackson. I thought that was funny. Okay, I got to run. So thank you so much.
Pull off this last minute thing here about the Eagles, like broad perspective. Then you end on a Swift and Deshaun Jackson comparison.
I had to run right now. I just had to. I wanted to bunch of shit off.
It just flashed before. Okay. I got to get it in there.
Yeah, I was just thinking like the other night. I'm like, man, because I do remember how bleak it felt for the Eagles organization after that Dallas Cowboys game. That was one of the worst football games I've ever watched as an Eagles fan. Was watching Red Rocket pick apart the Eagles defense. That was a Michael Chiquette game as well. Like that was such a disaster football game. And like just thinking back to now, like they just made the Super Bowl. They just made all these acquisitions. Like it's a good time to be an Eagles fan. It's a good time to be alive. And now we got a couple months to kind of sit on it. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate it. Make sure to check out sponsors BetterHelp and Sweat Taylor. Make sure to like, subscribe, anything you do to help with the channel. And we will talk to you later.